September 4, 2013 started as a usual workday for the employees of the Willowbrook County Courthouse in Virginia. The morning, which seemed routine, was disrupted by a tragic event that would soon turn the lives of many people upside down. Judge Aaron Caldwell, one of the most respected representatives of justice in the region, was found dead in his office. Around 8:30 in the morning, Court Secretary Jane Morris came to Caldwell's office with documents that the judge had to sign before the hearing began. When she opened the door, she was met with a strange silence and an unusually gloomy atmosphere. Aaron was sitting at his desk, his head bowed forward, and a gun lay on the floor next to him. Jane immediately called for an ambulance and the police. At first glance, everything pointed to suicide. The gun, presumably belonging to the judge, was registered in his name, and the position of the body and the visible wound were consistent with the version that death occurred as a result of a gunshot to the head. However, even in the first minutes of examining the crime scene, some details began to raise doubts. The first thing that alerted the arriving detectives was the posture of the body. Although the judge was sitting at his desk, the angle of the gun's fall and the location of the bloodstain did not match the trajectory of the alleged shot. In addition, there were no traces of gunpowder on either the judge's hands or the weapon, a clear sign that he had not personally fired it. Forensic experts began to examine the crime scene. The gun, to their surprise, turned out to be carefully wiped of fingerprints, which is uncharacteristic of suicides. A handwritten note with the simple text, "Forgive me," was found on the desk. However, the handwriting raised suspicions. It was similar to the judge's handwriting, but experts noted minor deviations in the slope of the letters and the writing style. Investigators expanded their search for clues beyond the office. Testimonies were taken from court staff, security guards, and maintenance personnel. The building's surveillance cameras recorded that the judge entered the building around 7:15 in the morning, but did not leave it until the body was discovered. However, the recordings from the cameras in the corridor leading to the office for the last 2 hours before the estimated time of death were strangely damaged. Forensic experts confirmed that death occurred between 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the morning. But during this time interval, none of the employees noticed anything unusual. Court security guard Tom Bailey, who was on duty that morning, recalled hearing a strange pop but attributed it to the sound of a closing door. When the forensic examination data began to come in, the initial version of suicide was rejected. Traces of a struggle were found on the judge's body, abrasions on the hands and a scratch on the neck, indicating recent contact with someone else. Traces of someone else's DNA were also found on his shirt, which did not match anyone from the judge's inner circle. This evidence forced Detective Carla Haynes and her team to officially reclassify the case as a murder. The main task was to find out who might have wanted the judge's death and what motives were behind this crime. Caldwell was known as a strict but fair judge. During his career, he considered many high-profile cases related to organized crime, corruption, and violence. The investigation line initially focused on the possibility of revenge by ill-wishers associated with his professional activities. However, when the last weeks of his life were examined, more personal and alarming circumstances were revealed that could shed light on the true motives for the murder. The discovery of Judge Caldwell's body marked the beginning of a complex and multi-layered investigation, where the details of each street and witness testimony came together to form a story that far exceeded initial suspicions. Aaron Caldwell was not just a judge. He was a symbol of justice in Willowbrook County, a man whose name was associated with honesty and unwavering commitment to the law. But behind the outward shine of professional success lay a complex personal life, full of inner conflicts, disappointments, and secret compromises. Caldwell was born in 1961 into a family of a lawyer and teacher in Charleston, West Virginia. His father, Joseph Caldwell, was a well-known civil rights attorney, and his mother, Marion, taught literature. Surrounded by an example of hard work and the pursuit of justice, Aaron showed an inclination for analytical thinking and a passion for law from a young age. After graduating from Harvard Law School, he returned to Virginia, where he began his career as a prosecutor. His successful handling of a number of high-profile cases quickly attracted attention, and in 2002 he was appointed a district court judge. Over the decades of service, Caldwell earned a reputation as an incorruptible judge whose decisions were balanced and well-founded. However, his strict adherence to the law made him a target for those who found themselves at odds with his decisions. The refusal to compromise and accept behind-the-scenes deals repeatedly became a reason for threats, which created additional tension in both his professional and personal life. Outside the courtroom, Caldwell's life was also the subject of close scrutiny. His wife, Elise Caldwell, was a well-known public figure in Willowbrook, engaged in charity work and participating in the life of the city. They married in 1988 and seemed to represent the perfect couple, a respected judge and an elegant society lady. However, problems were hidden under the facade of harmony. Elise often complained to friends about her husband's emotional detachment. His career aspirations left little time for family, and frequent delays at work and late meetings only exacerbated the discord. The couple had no children, which, according to rumors, also created tension in their relationship. From 2010, their joint appearances at public events became less frequent. Police, according to acquaintances, began to spend more time with girlfriends and on charitable projects, while Aaron became increasingly withdrawn. By 2012, Caldwell's inner state began to deteriorate. Although outwardly he remained an exemplary judge, his friends and colleagues noticed signs of emotional burnout. Aaron often looked tired and distracted. During hearings, he could become irritable, which was previously uncharacteristic of him. Some assumed that he was experiencing a midlife crisis, while others attributed it to unresolved family problems. In the same year, he began to actively participate in a university mentoring program for young lawyers. The project seemed to give him a new meaning, an opportunity to share experiences and help new generations of lawyers. This decision proved fateful, as it was within the framework of this program that he met Sophia Lane, a young woman who would become an important figure in his life. Despite outward prosperity, signs of a crisis were accumulating in the judge's life. According to his closest friends, Caldwell increasingly spoke of a sense of loneliness and dissatisfaction. For the first time in many years, he even considered the possibility of leaving the profession, contemplating teaching or writing memoirs. These inner torments, perhaps, made him vulnerable to the relationship he began with Sophia. Although outwardly he remained as steadfast as ever, this period of his life became a turning point when personal weaknesses began to intersect with the professional sphere. One of the key events that preceded the beginning of the affair was an argument with Elise in early 2012. According to her close friends, the cause of the conflict was rumors that Caldwell was spending too much time on mentoring. Elise saw this as an attempt to escape their problems, although she herself did not suspect what it might lead to. From this moment on, their relationship turned into a state of cold coexistence. Elise continued to maintain the public image of the perfect wife, but their life together effectively ceased. This discord created an emotional vacuum that Caldwell later tried to fill with new, albeit forbidden, relationships. Aaron Caldwell's life, so bright in the professional arena, was actually a tangled web of disappointments, ambitions, and inner contradictions. It was this duality that became the background for the events that would soon lead to a tragic denouement. In the spring of 2012, fate brought Aaron Caldwell together with Sophia Lane. This acquaintance, which began as a professional connection within the framework of the university mentoring program, quickly grew into something much more personal than either side expected. For the judge, who was in a state of internal crisis, Sophia became a ray of freshness and a new stimulus. For Sophia, these relationships were a chance to break out of her difficult life situation. The program in which Caldwell participated was created by the law faculty of the University of Virginia. Its goal was for successful lawyers and judges to mentor students, helping them develop skills, navigate the professional environment, and build a career. Caldwell, who was known for his professionalism and charisma, quickly became one of the most popular mentors. Sophia Lane, a 20-year-old student who grew up in a small town near Richmond, was one of the program participants. The girl impressed Coldwell with her persistence and desire to break out of the limitations of her social environment. Her family lived in poverty, and Sophia was the first of her relatives to enter university. This success did not come easily for her. In addition to studying, she worked part-time in a local coffee shop to cover the cost of housing and study materials. Their first meeting took place at an open meeting of the program. Sophia was active, asked questions, and stood out from other students. Aaron, seeing her desire and sincerity, offered her personal mentoring. This decision was dictated not only by her abilities, but also by the feeling of sympathy he felt for her story. The first meetings took place in a formal setting. Aaron helped Sophia prepare for exams, explained complex legal concepts, and shared his experience. Sophia, in turn, showed a lively interest, asked deep questions, and listened attentively. Gradually, their conversations began to go beyond academic topics. As they communicated, an emotional closeness arose between them. Sophia saw in Coldwell not only a mentor but also a figure who could become her protector and guide to a world of opportunities that were previously inaccessible to her. He, in turn, felt significant, helping a young woman who seemed to admire him. Mutual sympathy began to manifest itself in small things. Long conversations that went beyond the scheduled time, smiles, and glances. Aaron felt that with Sophia he could be himself, that she saw in him not a judge or a public figure, but simply a person. By the fall of 2012, their communication had become increasingly personal. Sophia began to confide in Coldwell about her personal experiences, difficulties with family, financial problems, and self-doubt. Aaron responded to her openness with support and sometimes concrete help. One such episode occurred when Sophia said that she could not pay for the semester. Coldwell, without hesitation, offered her help by transferring money to her account. The first date, although unofficial, took place in November 2012. Aaron invited Sophia to dinner, which began as a business meeting but quickly turned into an informal conversation. Their romantic relationship, although it developed gradually, began to form during this period. One of the key features of their relationship was the power that Aaron had over Sophia. Despite the fact that their connection was built on mutual sympathy, the difference in age, status, and life experience created an obvious imbalance. Sophia was young, inexperienced, and dependent on his help, both financially and emotionally. Caldwell, realizing this, did not use his power intentionally, but the fact of its existence could not be ignored. This created a tension that would later become one of the catalysts for the tragic events. Realizing that their relationship was unacceptable in the eyes of society and could damage his reputation, Aaron insisted that they keep everything a secret. Sophia, aware of the risks, agreed. Their meetings began to take place in remote restaurants, and communication switched to personal phones. Caldwell also used his power to reduce the risk of disclosure, for example, by organizing meetings in his private office or outside the city. The secrecy that accompanied their relationship added tension and passion to it, but also became the ground for future conflicts. Sophia seemed to have genuinely fallen in love with Aaron, but with each month she increasingly realized that their connection was not equal. By the end of 2012, their relationship had become increasingly complex. Although romance and passion still dominated, the difference in expectations began to manifest itself. Sophia dreamed that their connection would come out of the shadows, seeing in Caldwell her future partner. Aaron, on the contrary, understood that openness would lead to devastating consequences for his career and family. The beginning of the affair became a salvation for both of them from internal problems. But even then it was clear that their relationship, built on inequality and secrecy, could not develop without consequences. By October 2012, the affair between Aaron Caldwell and Sophia Lane had entered a phase of intense passion and dependence. Their relationship developed against the backdrop of increasing tension that encompassed the personal, professional, and emotional spheres of both participants' lives. Each of them found something in this affair that was missing in their lives, but at the same time their connection became increasingly dangerous. The relationship between Caldwell and Sophia became something more for both of them than just a secret affair. Aaron, who had previously been a man of principles and strict boundaries, began to retreat from his moral standards. Sophia, in turn, became increasingly fascinated by the illusion of the life that Aaron promised her. He became for her not only a lover but also a symbol of power, prosperity, and stability, which she so aspired to. Aaron began to make expensive gifts to Sophia more and more often: jewelry, designer clothes, expensive accessories. These gestures were perceived by Sophia as proof of his sincerity, but in reality, they only strengthened her dependence on him. In addition, he rented an apartment for her in a prestigious area, which allowed her to leave her part-time job and focus on her studies in their relationship. One of the key features of their relationship was Sophia's belief that they could have a future together. Aaron, perhaps unconsciously, fueled her hopes. In moments of intimacy, he promised that one day he would be able to leave his family for her. These promises gave Sophia a reason to continue, despite the moral and social risks. However, in reality, Coldwell had no intention of radically changing his life. His status, reputation, and career were too valuable to him to risk them for a relationship that he considered temporary. This duality, promises without intentions to fulfill them, became the basis for future conflicts. Sophia became increasingly immersed in a relationship that became more unequal with each month. She completely relied on Aaron both financially and emotionally. Any attempt to limit their connection caused her to panic and feel rejected. Aaron, realizing her dependence, began to exhibit domineering behavior. He dictated when and where they could meet and decided what aspects of their relationship could be acceptable. Sophia, afraid of losing him, made concessions even when it contradicted her desires. While Coldwell's relationship with Sophia deepened, his marriage to Elise continued to disintegrate. Elise felt that her husband had become even more distant. She began to suspect that there was another woman in his life, but she had no proof. Aaron, in turn, avoided discussions and justified his behavior with stressful work. The tension in the family became noticeable to others. Coldwell's colleagues noticed that he had become irritable and less focused. His authority in the professional environment remained high, but changes in his behavior caused rumors. Aaron, realizing the risk of exposure, did everything possible to keep the affair a secret. He avoided appearing with Sophia in places where they could be recognized, and even limited their meetings. However, Sophia, feeling increasingly isolated and hidden, began to express dissatisfaction. These changes became the cause of the first major conflicts between them. Sophia insisted that their relationship should become more open, but Aaron rejected this idea, arguing for the need to protect his career and reputation. By the beginning of 2013, both of them began to show symptoms of an emotional crisis. Aaron felt guilty about his double life, but could not give up this relationship, which had become a way for him to escape from reality. Sophia, on the contrary, increasingly felt insecurity and fear of being rejected. These contradictions became increasingly acute, laying the foundation for future dramatic events. By this point, the relationship between Coldwell and Sophia had already ceased to be a source of exclusively positive emotions. The secrecy, addiction, and power dynamics began to turn their connection into a field of confrontation. Sophia increasingly began to ask questions about the future and express her grievances. Aaron, feeling pressure, tried to distance himself, which only intensified her fears and dissatisfaction. The period of deepening the relationship became a trap for both of them, from which it was increasingly difficult to escape. Although outwardly the appearance of passion and affection was still maintained, internal tension was growing. This tension would soon lead them to a point of no return. By the beginning of 2013, the relationship between Aaron Coldwell and Sophia Lane began to deteriorate rapidly. If earlier their connection was built on mutual sympathy, now it was becoming an arena of tension, manipulation, and mutual accusations. The power dynamics that initially helped to hold their bond together began to work against them, turning the relationship into an endless cycle of conflicts and reconciliations. The first significant event that marked the beginning of the end of their affair was Aaron's decision to limit the frequency of meetings. Pressure from his wife Elise, growing suspicion from colleagues, and an inner sense of guilt forced him to reconsider his priorities. He began to cancel meetings with Sophia, more often justifying it with being busy at work. Sophia perceived this as a signal of loss of interest, which only intensified her emotional instability. One of their first serious conflicts occurred in February 2013. Sophia made a scene at one of their rare meetings, accusing Aaron of using her and intending to leave her. Coldwell, who was used to Sophia being obedient and grateful, was not ready for such a sharp turn. Their argument ended with Sophia abruptly leaving and subsequent days of silence. After this quarrel, Sophia's behavior began to noticeably change. She began to exhibit signs of obsessiveness, writing Aaron numerous messages, calling him at night, and even attempting to meet with him at work several times. These actions began to cause not only irritation but also fear in Coldwell that their connection might be exposed. One of the most alarming episodes occurred in March 2013, when Sophia unexpectedly came to Aaron's house. She waited for him in the car as he was returning from work. Their conversation that evening quickly turned into an argument. Sophia demanded explanations and promises, while Aaron, in turn, insisted on the need to take a break. This only intensified her sense of despair. Meanwhile, Elise Coldwell, who had long suspected her husband of infidelity, began to take active steps to find out the truth. She hired a private detective to find out what Aaron was hiding. In April 2013, the detective provided her with photographs showing Aaron meeting with a young woman in a restaurant. Although the quality of the images did not allow identifying Sophia, it was enough for Elise. The spouses began to openly conflict. Elise accused Aaron of betrayal, threatening to file for divorce and ruin his career. Aaron, who until this moment was confident in his ability to control the situation, found himself trapped between a wife who demanded explanations and a mistress who insisted on greater openness. Quarrels between Sophia and Aaron began to occur more and more often. Sophia increasingly demanded attention and confirmation of his feelings, while Aaron increasingly distanced himself. Each of their meetings was accompanied by tension and mutual accusations. Sophia accused him of cowardice and unwillingness to change his life for her, and he, in turn, reproached her for obsession and emotional pressure. One of the most striking scenes was their meeting in May 2013. Sophia, learning that Aaron was planning to spend a vacation with his wife, threw a tantrum. She threatened to tell Elise everything if he did not stop his family life farce. This case became a turning point in their relationship. In June 2013, Sophia's behavior became even more alarming. She began to threaten to publicize their relationship. Sophia claimed that she had correspondence and photographs that could ruin his career and marriage. For Coldwell, this came as a shock. He did not expect that Sophia would go so far. Her threats soon turned into blackmail. Sophia insisted that Aaron fulfill his promises, leave his wife, and start a new life with her. Otherwise, she threatened to hand over the evidence of their connection to the press or the district court. Coldwell, frightened and enraged, tried to convince Sophia that her actions would lead to disaster for both of them, but his arguments had no effect. Another aspect that aggravated the situation was money. Sophia, accustomed to Aaron's gifts and financial support, began to demand more and more often. Her lifestyle had changed, and she did not want to return to her previous difficulties. Coldwell, who was already under pressure, began to cut her funding, which became another source of conflict. Sophia not only threatened exposure but also began to hint that she could use the money and gifts she received from him as evidence of their connection. For Coldwell, this was an additional blow, as he understood that her accusations, even without evidence, could cause him irreparable damage. By this point, Sophia was in a state of extreme emotional instability. Her behavior became unpredictable, her threats increasingly radical. She became obsessed with the idea of holding on to Coldwell at any cost, even if it led to the destruction of their lives. Aaron, for his part, began to look for ways to permanently sever the connection. However, he realized that doing it safely would be extremely difficult. Every step he took to distance himself from Sophia only intensified her aggression and despair. The spring and summer of 2013 became a period of escalation. Their relationship was no longer tied to either love or affection. It turned into a battlefield where each tried to protect their own interests. For Sophia, it was a struggle for survival and recognition. For Aaron, an attempt to preserve his life, family, and career. The conflict that smoldered between them was inevitably bound to reach a climax. Everything indicated that their connection would soon end, but neither of them could predict at what cost it would happen. The summer of 2013 was the culmination period in the relationship between Aaron Coldwell and Sophia Lane. Against the backdrop of growing tension, their connection turned into emotional chaos, full of threats, manipulation, and crazy decisions. Each step towards a breakup led to an intensification of the conflict, which could no longer be controlled. By July 2013, Sophia's behavior had become completely unpredictable. Her obsession reached a new level. She followed Aaron, showed up at events where he was with Elise, and even tried to contact his colleagues. Sophia felt that she was losing control of the situation, and her actions became increasingly risky. One of the alarming incidents was her appearance at a court hearing where Coldwell was presiding. She sat in the hall, clearly demonstrating her presence. This greatly frightened Aaron, as he feared that she might make a scene or attract media attention. After the hearing, he met with her and demanded that she stop such actions. But Sophia replied that she would act as she saw fit if he did not fulfill his promises. Sophia began to actively threaten Aaron with exposure. She claimed that she would tell the press or the Coldwell family about their relationship if he did not leave Elise and start a new life with her. These threats were not empty. Sophia did have evidence of their connection, including photographs, correspondence, and gifts that he gave her. For Aaron, this was a serious blow. He understood that, even if Sophia did not take action, the threat of her exposure hung over him like the sword of Damocles. He tried to negotiate with her, offered financial assistance, just so that she would leave him alone. However, Sophia perceived this as an attempt to buy her off and only increased her pressure. One of the most dramatic episodes was a charity gala evening that took place in June 2013. It was an annual event at which Elise Coldwell traditionally played one of the main roles. Aaron came there accompanied by his wife, trying to maintain the appearance of well-being. However, Sophia also appeared at the party, and she invited her roommate, Ethan Grayson, in order not to attract unnecessary attention. During the event, Sophia tried several times to approach Aaron. Her behavior became noticeable to others, including Elise. At some point, Sophia and Aaron found themselves alone in one of the halls, where a sharp quarrel occurred between them. Sophia again stated that she would ruin his life if he did not stop deceiving her. The quarrel ended with Aaron abruptly leaving the room, while Sophia remained in a state of rage. This scene did not go unnoticed by Ethan. He was Sophia's friend, but his involvement in this story became much more significant than it seemed at first glance. In July 2013, Sophia, realizing that her threats were not yet yielding results, decided to prepare more serious evidence for blackmail. She asked Ethan to help her collect all the data that could be used against Aaron: messages, emails, gifts. Ethan, who had more than friendly feelings for Sophia, agreed to help. Some of her actions were particularly risky. For example, Sophia once broke into Aaron's office using a duplicate key that she had made earlier. She was trying to find documents or other materials that could help her in blackmail. These actions only confirmed how far she was willing to go. By August 2013, the relationship between Sophia and Aaron turned into open warfare. He tried to distance himself, but she would not let him. Sophia insisted on meetings, wrote him letters, and continued to threaten. She also began to express her hatred of Elise more openly, accusing her of keeping Aaron with her. Coldwell began to seriously fear for his safety. He consulted with lawyers about how he could protect himself if Sophia took action. However, none of the proposed options seemed sufficient to him. He understood that the situation was out of control, but he could not find a way to resolve it. During this period, Ethan began to play a more active role in Sophia's life. Although he was initially just her roommate, he began to influence her. Ethan was a man with a difficult past and a hot temper. He genuinely cared about Sophia, but his motives were mixed with jealousy and a desire to control her life. Ethan became her ally in the fight against Erin. He supported her in her decision to blackmail the judge and even suggested more radical methods. Their relationship was becoming increasingly dangerous for all participants, laying the foundation for the tragedy that was to happen. By the end of August 2013, all parties were on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Sophia was obsessed with the idea of punishing Erin, who, in her opinion, had betrayed her. Erin, feeling that he could no longer control the situation, began to think about going to the police, but he was afraid that this would lead to the disclosure of his connection with Sophia. Ethan, who was increasingly drawn into this story, began to push Sophia to more radical actions. He convinced her that the only way to resolve the situation was to force Coldwell to answer for his actions. These conversations became harbingers of the fateful night that would change their lives forever. September 3, 2013 was the night when the tension that had accumulated between Erin Coldwell, Sophia Lane, and Ethan Grayson reached its tragic peak. All parties, gripped by emotions, made decisions that led to irreversible consequences. That evening, Erin stayed at home, planning to spend time preparing for the next day's court hearing. Elise went to meet with friends, leaving him alone. Coldwell felt cornered. He knew that the situation with Sophia had become too dangerous, but he had not yet decided how to proceed. By then, Erin had already been collecting information about Sophia's behavior for several weeks. He had recordings of calls, copies of her messages that he planned to use in case she tried to ruin his career. However, he knew that this evidence might not be enough against her. Around 10 o'clock in the evening, he heard someone open the door to his office. Coldwell expected it to be Elise, but instead, Sophia entered. Sophia knew that Elise would not be home and took advantage of this. She entered the house with the help of a key that she had taken from Erin several months ago when the relationship between them was still warm. Sophia did not warn Ethan about her plans, but took her phone with her to record the conversation. Sophia was full of anger and despair. She immediately began to accuse Erin of betrayal, of using her and throwing her away like an unnecessary thing. Erin tried to keep his cool, urging her to calm down and leave, but Sophia was not going to back down. The conversation quickly turned into an argument. Sophia shouted her accusations, and Erin, losing patience, tried to defend himself. He reminded her that her behavior could destroy them both, and even offered her financial compensation to leave him alone. But these words only angered Sophia even more. She took out her phone and began recording the conversation, threatening to send the recording to his wife, colleagues, and journalists. Erin tried to take the phone, and a struggle ensued between them. This moment became the point of no return. Ethan, who remained in the apartment where he lived with Sophia, began to worry that she was away for too long. He knew that she had gone to Erin, and, sensing something was wrong, decided to go after her. He arrived at Coldwell's house around 10:30 and saw that the office door was ajar. Going inside, he saw Sophia and Erin arguing. In a state of rage, Ethan intervened, defending Sophia. He accused Erin of ruining her life and began to threaten him. The confrontation turned into a physical altercation. The situation quickly spiraled out of control. Ethan threw himself at Erin, pushing him toward the desk. Sophia, in a panic, tried to stop Ethan, but her attempts only aggravated the situation. At some point, Ethan grabbed a gun that was lying in Coldwell's desk drawer. Erin tried to stop him, but the shot rang out before anyone could realize what had happened. The bullet hit Erin in the head, instantly taking his life. Silence fell. Sophia was in shock, her hands shaking, and Ethan seemed to realize what he had just done. Ethan, realizing that they were now both in mortal danger, decided to stage a suicide. He wiped the gun to remove his fingerprints and placed it next to Erin's body. Sophia, although horrified by what had happened, helped him. They arranged everything to look as if Aaron had shot himself. After that, Ethan and Sophia left the house. They agreed not to tell anyone about what had happened and to keep everything a secret. However, their plans soon began to fall apart when the police began an investigation. When Aaron's body was discovered on the morning of September 4th, the police immediately noticed a number of discrepancies indicating that the death could have been violent. Their actions that night left traces that would soon lead investigators to Sophia and Ethan. The fateful night became the point where personal tragedy turned into a criminal case. Everything that happened during those few hours would begin to unravel before the court, exposing the power, obsession, and destructive emotions that led to the judge's death. The investigation into the death of Judge Aaron Caldwell began immediately after his body was discovered on the morning of September 4th, 2013. Initially, the case looked like a suicide, but an experienced team of investigators, led by Detective Carla Haynes, quickly discovered many inconsistencies that forced them to reclassify this incident as a murder. The forensics team conducted a detailed examination of Caldwell's office. Although the gun was lying next to the body, and the wound indicated a shot to the head, a number of clues immediately raised doubts. Among them, absence of gunshot residue on the judge's hands, which is uncharacteristic of suicides. The position of the gun, the angle at which it fell did not coincide with the alleged trajectory of the shot. Signs of a struggle, abrasions were found on Caldwell's hands, and traces of someone else's DNA were found on his shirt. The note, the short phrase "forgive me," was written in handwriting similar to Caldwell's, but experts noted minor deviations indicating possible forgery. These discrepancies forced the detectives to consider the version of murder staged as suicide. Caldwell had many enemies because of his professional activities. He considered high-profile cases related to organized crime and corruption. Investigators initially assumed that his death could have been an act of revenge. However, when Detective Haynes began to study the judge's personal life, circumstances came to light that changed the direction of the investigation. A key role was played by data on his recent calls and correspondence. In the judge's mobile phone, numerous messages from a young woman, Sophia Lane, were found. Some of them were threatening in nature, which immediately attracted the attention of the investigation. The police began to question people from Caldwell's inner circle. Police, his wife, provided information about the growing tension in their marriage. She mentioned that she suspected her husband of cheating but did not know with whom exactly. Court staff spoke of strange visits by a young woman they had seen in the building in recent months. Sophia Lane was summoned for questioning as a witness. She was nervous but denied any involvement in the judge's death. However, her behavior, as well as inconsistencies in her story, made Detective Haynes suspicious. Sophia claimed that she had not communicated with Aaron for a long time, but the phone call data contradicted her words. Meanwhile, Ethan Grayson, Sophia's roommate, also came to the attention of the investigation. Detectives learned that he was near Caldwell's house on the night of the murder. His testimony was unconvincing, and soon the police obtained a search warrant for their apartment. During the search of Sophia and Ethan's apartment, investigators found a lot of incriminating evidence. Photographs and messages, Sophia's correspondence with Aaron, confirming their romantic relationship, copies of documents, materials that Sophia was clearly collecting for blackmail, phone recording, an unfinished recording of their last quarrel, where the voices of Caldwell, Sophia, and Ethan could be heard. These findings confirmed the police's suspicions that Sophia and Ethan were involved in the incident. DNA analysis also revealed that the traces found on Caldwell's shirt matched the samples taken from Sophia. On September 16, 2013, the police detained Sophia Lane. She was charged with second-degree murder as well as attempted blackmail. During interrogation, she behaved uncertainly, claiming that she did not want Aaron's death and was only trying to achieve justice. However, her confessions confirmed that she was in Caldwell's house on the night of his murder. A few days later, Ethan Grayson was arrested. Under the pressure of evidence, he admitted that it was he who shot the judge, but he claimed that it happened in a fit of anger, not intentionally. However, his attempt to stage a suicide, as well as his role in planning the events, made him the main defendant. The news of Judge Caldwell's murder and the revelation of his secret affair caused a wide resonance. The press covered every stage of the investigation, portraying it as a tragic story of power, betrayal, and obsession. Sophia was presented as a naive victim who found herself at the epicenter of a destructive relationship, and Ethan as a jealous and vengeful accomplice. Meanwhile, Elise Caldwell avoided communication with the press. She moved out of the house where the tragedy occurred and ceased all public appearances. The Caldwell case became one of the most high-profile in the history of Willowbrook County. The prosecutor's office was preparing charges based on extensive evidence, including DNA materials, correspondence, and confessions of the accused. Sophia and Ethan would face trial as the main figures in the case, but their versions of what happened would differ significantly. The investigation finally revealed the web of manipulation, power, and obsession that led to the death of a respected judge. Now the question was how the court and jury would assess their role in this crime. January 2015 marked the beginning of one of the most high-profile trials in the history of Willowbrook. The case of the murder of Judge Aaron Caldwell attracted the attention of the entire country. The trial lasted almost 2 months and included emotional testimonies, conflicting statements, and a deep examination of the complex relationships that led to the tragic denouement. The prosecution brought charges of second-degree murder against Sophia Lane and Ethan Grayson, arguing that they acted with premeditation and jointly. Prosecutors focused on the dynamics of power, blackmail, and emotional pressure that turned their relationship with Caldwell into a deadly threat. Sophia and Ethan, although they were defendants, presented different versions of what happened, which created tension not only between the sides but also within the defense team. The prosecutors began by portraying Caldwell as a man drawn into a dangerous relationship with a young woman who later became a threat to him. The main arguments of the prosecution were DNA and physical evidence, traces on the judge's shirt, recordings of telephone conversations, and photographs found in Sophia's possession. Recording of the quarrel, an audio file that captured the voices of Aaron, Sophia, and Ethan. Prosecutors argued that the recording testified to the intention to use blackmail to gain control over the judge. Evidence of threats, numerous messages from Sophia with hints of destroying Caldwell's career. The prosecution also presented Ethan as an active participant in the conflict, who consciously intervened and led to the tragic outcome. It was claimed that it was he who shot Caldwell and then staged a suicide. Sophia's lawyers built a defense on the image of their ward as a victim of manipulation by Aaron Caldwell. They argued that Sophia, being a young and naive woman, was drawn into a relationship in which she could not fully realize her vulnerability. The main arguments of the defense: emotional instability. The lawyers argued that Sophia could not control her actions due to the pressure exerted on her by the relationship with Caldwell. Ethan's influence. The defense tried to minimize Sophia's role in the incident, focusing on the fact that her actions were provoked by Ethan. Lack of direct participation. The lawyers insisted that Sophia did not plan the murder and did not know that Ethan would go to such extreme measures. Sophia gave emotional testimony in which she described how she felt captured and used in her relationship with Aaron. She admitted that she made mistakes but insisted that she never wanted his death. Ethan, on the contrary, presented himself as a man acting in a state of passion. His lawyers built a defense on the following. Sophia's defense. Ethan claimed that he intervened to protect Sophia from violence by Caldwell. Unintentional nature of actions. The lawyers insisted that the shot occurred accidentally during the struggle. Emotional instability. The defense emphasized that Ethan was strongly influenced by the situation, which he considered unfair. Ethan testified, describing how he was outraged by Caldwell's behavior and decided to intervene to stop the conflict. He also admitted that he staged the suicide, but insisted that it was done in a panic. Key witnesses testified at the trial, including Elise Caldwell. Her story about the discord in the marriage and suspicions of infidelity added drama, but also strengthened the prosecution's arguments about the motive for blackmail. Caldwell's colleagues. They described him as a man who was under stress due to personal problems, but never showed signs of a tendency to suicide. Sophia's friends. They spoke about her emotional state and behavior, confirming that she was under great pressure. The prosecution concluded the case by stating that the actions of Sophia and Ethan led to Coldwell's death, and both defendants should be found guilty. Sophia's defense asked the jury to consider her age, vulnerability, and the pressure she was under. Ethan's defense insisted that his actions were not premeditated. On February 28, 2015, the jury rendered a verdict. Sophia Lane was found guilty of second-degree murder. The court took into account her age and emotional state as mitigating circumstances. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Ethan Grayson was found guilty of premeditated murder and received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. After the trial, the Lees Coldwell sold their house and left Willowbrook. Sophia and Ethan began serving their sentences, their stories becoming the subject of public condemnation and discussion in the media. The Coldwell case became a cautionary tale of how power, obsession, and manipulation can destroy lives. It left many questions about the nature of human weaknesses and the boundaries of responsibility that continue to be discussed to this day. After the end of the trial, the case of Erin Coldwell became the object of numerous discussions and studies. It revealed the dark sides of power, vulnerability, and human relationships, leaving a deep mark on the public consciousness. Sophia Lane, sent to prison, tried to adapt to the new reality. Her lawyers filed appeals, arguing that her sentence was too harsh, given her age and emotional state. However, public opinion remained against her. Many saw Sophia as the embodiment of the dangers associated with manipulation and obsession. While in custody, Sophia wrote several letters that were later published in the media. In them, she described her repentance, regret for her actions, and lost life. These letters evoked a mixed reaction. Some saw sincerity in them. Others saw another attempt to justify herself. Ethan Grayson, sentenced to life imprisonment, practically did not communicate with the outside world after his conviction. His lawyers tried to mitigate the sentence, but to no avail. Ethan remained a mysterious figure around whom theories were built about what exactly motivated his actions. Jealousy, a sense of justice, or personal hatred of Coldwell. Lees Coldwell, Erin's widow, left Willowbrook, leaving behind the entire history associated with her husband. She refused to participate in public discussions about the case and chose to start a new life in another state. Her charitable activities continued, but no longer on the same scale as before. The story of Judge Coldwell became a cautionary one. It raised questions about the dynamics of power. How permissible are relationships in which one side has a significant advantage in experience, status, and resources? Responsibility for manipulation. What are the limits of responsibility of a person who enters into a relationship with a vulnerable partner, and what happens when this vulnerability is exploited? The role of emotions in crimes. The Coldwell case showed how emotions can turn into a destructive force if they are not managed. The media and researchers discussed how this story demonstrates the dangers of abuse of trust and power, as well as the fragility of moral principles even among the most respected people. After the high-profile case, Virginia began to discuss the need for new norms and standards to prevent such tragedies. The University Mentoring Program, within the framework of which Coldwell and Sophia met, was temporarily suspended to revise its structure. Stricter rules were introduced to regulate the relationship between mentors and students in order to avoid abuse. The judicial system also drew conclusions. The Coldwell case became the basis for training new judges and lawyers, serving as an example of how personal mistakes can undermine professional reputation and career. Despite the circumstances of his death, Coldwell left an important legacy in the form of his work in the judicial arena. His decisions, many of which were related to the protection of civil rights and the fight against corruption, continue to be cited in courts across the country. But his personal life remains a controversial episode that many prefer not to recall. The story of Judge Coldwell, Sophia Lane, and Ethan Grayson is a reminder of how destructive hidden weaknesses and unspoken emotions can be. It shows that even the strongest and most respected people are subject to the same temptations and mistakes as everyone else. This tragedy left behind many questions, but perhaps the main one is the question of the boundary between love, power, and obsession. Each of the parties to this story turned out to be a victim of their own decisions, and the lessons that can be learned from it will be relevant for a long time to come.